Hi, Harvest Life Bible School students. Here we are again. This is the second term of the first semester of your culminating project. So I'm going to be explaining exactly what you need to do during this second term. Here we go. We expect your attending Harvest Life Bible School will transform your life so that you and your team will have an impact on your community, that you'll be able to draw others closer to Christ, that you will see answers to prayer in amazing ways during these semesters that you are working on your culminating project. That's why we're doing this, so that giftings might come forth, so that we can see God working, so that it can be evident how Harvest Life Bible School has had an impact on your lives and the lives of others in our communities. So far, this is what you did during the first term of this semester. You formed a team, right? Everybody should be on a team. You've been praying and brainstorming plans for your project. That's great. I hope you've come up with some good ideas. Your team leaders have discussed your current project ideas with your Harvest Life Bible School advisor, and they did this before term 2 began. It's possible that if your team has been uncertain about your project, that your advisor has given your team leader some good suggestions about possible projects at Harvest Life Church. Okay, now what's next? This is what you're going to do during the second term. You're going to investigate the needs in your community, and you're going to make a plan, your project plan description, okay? Now, heads up for the team leaders. This will require 2 meetings with your team. I know that's a lot to ask. So we will talk about those 2 meetings, when you need to have them, as we move along. Now, the focus of this term is that you should learn before your launch. We want your team to have a successful and positive experience. We want it to be smooth sailing, like we see in this picture here, okay? And that requires that you learn about your project before you make up your final project plan. You know, it's amazing how many projects people start that don't work. Those of you that work helping communities in great need have seen firsthand how sometimes things work and sometimes they don't. So this team is dedicated to learning more about the community you're choosing to serve. We call that your target audience. What do you need to know before your team gets started? We don't want your ship sailing down toward that black hole, and we don't want you experiencing any more rocky seas than is absolutely necessary. So we're going to spend a few weeks during the second and third and the beginning of the 4th week to learn more about your target audience, your community that you're planning to serve. That's what your next step is. Investigating the needs in your community. The community we're talking about is the people that you're helping with your project or working with in your project. Learning about that setting, learning about those people. Okay, there's 3 ways to do this. Each member needs to choose one of the 3 following ways to learn about their community, their target audience. Number 1, You can do an interview an expert, someone who's very knowledgeable about that group. Number 2, you can simply observe the people you're planning to help. Okay? Number 3, you can do research. You can read and investigate about what other experienced people say, what other experts say. You can do that. So choose one of these 3 options. The only requirement is that every member must do at least one, and at least one of your members does need to do an interview. Okay? Now, what would an interview be like? You need to interview the experts. For example, if you were going to help in children's church, you would want to interview either Pastor Mike or Pastor Talina, right? They're the resident experts there. If you were going to help in a women's shelter, you would like to interview the director of the shelter, or at least a manager there, someone with a lot of experience. So you want to find out who's in charge, who knows most, and then of course you're going to make an appointment with that person, set up a time well in advance that you can go in and interview them. And before you arrive at that appointment, please come prepared. You want to write out specific questions and think through what you want to learn from them, how you and your team can be most helpful to them, what your team needs to know to be most effective in that environment. So write out your questions ahead of time. And then during the interview, your primary job is to listen, okay? Be a good listener. Take notes. Or you might ask permission to audio record the interview. Then you don't have to be distracted with notes. You can write down your notes later. But if you are going to audio record the interview, you must ask for permission before you start recording. If they say no, you can't record. So be sure to go with pen and paper to take notes in case a recording is not an option. And if you do make a recording, your team is probably not going to take the time to listen to that interview. You need to listen to the interview and take notes so that you can report back to your team about what was most important that you learned. Okay, option number 2, observing the people or the community that you will serve. Who will you observe, and where and when will you do your observations? Are you going to be observing as an insider or an outsider? So for example, if you're working with youth, fundraising for the youth, and you want to observe the youth in their activities, if you're not usually in the youth room, you're an outsider, okay? And you need to get permission from who's ever in charge to observe. Now, if you have been working with the youth and helping the youth for the last 6 months, you're kind of an insider, and they probably won't hardly notice you sitting there, standing there making observations because they're used to you being there. Nevertheless, always get permission from who's ever in charge. Make sure they know why you're there and what you're doing, and get permission to observe. You know, before you go in to observe, you really should think through what you're going to focus on as you observe, okay? And you will gain a lot more insight, be a keener observer if you think through and take a few notes about some of the things you expect to be observing. And then the question is, how will you take notes? In some settings, if you're taking notes, it's fine. But other settings, if you're standing there taking notes, you might be a disruption. You might make people feel self-conscious. why you're writing things down as you're looking at them. And you don't want to do that. So make sure you think through whether you should take notes while you're doing your observations or whether you should try to be less conspicuous and observe without taking notes. And then after your observations, you need to immediately after that time go sit down and write down as much as you can remember. Might take a half hour or an hour, but that's the time when things are fresh to capture all of your impressions and whatever you learned from your observations. And once again, you may not do any videotaping, you may not do any audio taping without permission from those who are in authority. And as far as the observation, I just recommend that you, unless you can get permission from everybody you're observing, you really should not be taking video or audio. That is not ethical. Just do written notes. Okay, so the third option is to do library research or online research. You need to decide the purpose of research is to gain from the experts, people with a lot more experience than you and me. And you need to decide where are you going to do that research. Probably the easiest place is online, going to Google Scholar. You could also do it at a library. You might find interesting books just going to Barnes and Noble's bookstore and paging through some things, interesting things there. All right, and when we're doing research, the most important thing to take us to the papers that we want is to know what keywords will help you find articles and information. So Google Scholar may have an advanced search where you can put in more than one keyword, and that might be helpful. Another thing you can do is if you were to put in children, that's going to bring up hundreds of articles. But if you could limit your search by using a phrase like children's church or teaching children in church, starting that phrase, put a quotation marks before and at the end of your phrase, and you can try different phrases like that. That might limit the articles and give you articles closer to what is helpful for you. For example, rather than homelessness, there would be thousands of articles. You could put homelessness in Boise, homelessness in Idaho. That phrase is going to bring you fewer articles and might help narrow your research to something closer to your target audience. And then you need to decide how you're going to report back to your team. They're not going to want to read these articles. That was your job, right? You need to take a few notes from the articles and what you've read that highlight and tell what you've learned for the next meeting where your team's getting together to bring all this information together to help in designing a really good project and starting well-informed. So team leaders know that you're going to need to set up a meeting for everyone on your team to share what they learned from their interview or observation or their research during the 4th week of this term. So you're going to be doing the research during the after your 2nd class and before your 5th class. So you have after your 2nd class, after your 3rd class, and maybe a few days after your 4th class. And then you need to set a time for your group to get together and talk about what they've learned. And this can be an online meeting, but it takes all the team members need to be there, so set that up well in advance. And that'll be a great time talking about what you've learned and maybe getting some more ideas about what your project's going to look like. And then individually, every team member needs to write a reflection paper, which is due on the 5th class of this term. So you are going to be answering 2 or 3 questions about your experience of gathering information, whether that was through interview, observation, or research, what you learned, and how that worked out for you personally. That's what your reflection paper is about. I will hand out the form before the 3rd class session, and I will send another reminder after the 4th class session so that you can get that done individually before the due date, which is the 5th class of this term. Okay, now there's another meeting you do after that. Your team needs to meet with their advisor to discuss the project before the 5th class in this term. So you have 2 meetings before the 5th class, okay? One of your team coming together, sharing what they've learned, and a second meeting of the team coming together to meet with the advisor to speak specifically about what your project's going to be, what's the setting, what are you trying to accomplish, what are your goals, how are you going to try to accomplish those goals, what do you need, what are you going to do next. So this also can be virtual, it can be done by Zoom, but team leaders, once again, that needs to be set up before the 5th class session. So make sure to make that appointment a time when all of your class members and your advisor can meet. That's going to be a great meeting. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, and then during that meeting with your advisor, as you're formulating the final plan for your project, and what you're hoping to accomplish, that's your second action, making a plan. Then the team leader is going to submit the team's culminating project description for their advisor's final approval, and this gets turned in anytime by the 6th class or before. So that's a written form. I will get those forms to all the team leaders during that 3rd class session and send the form to you again with a reminder electronically by email about the 5th class session. Okay, so what's next? There's nothing else to do this semester. You've investigated your needs, you've made a plan. Individually, you turned in your reflection paper, and as a leader, you've turned in the culminating project description plan. So you're done for this semester. Great. Now, it's possible that in the next semester, what's in yellow here is what happens next. But this happens next semester. You start working your plan and then evaluating how it's working. And each semester, you'll be doing at least 3 actions toward your plan with your group. Now, it's possible that you got excited about this plan and you want to do something now. or you want to do something certainly before the next semester starts, which could be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months away. So if any individuals in your group or your group want to start doing something related to your plan, I just wanted to let you know that whatever you do between semesters, that all counts. That all counts as activity for next semester. If you get started early, that's fine. That's quite fine. You can. Or if you just want to let the project lie and do nothing until next semester starts because life is busy, you don't have time for that, that's fine too. Whether you work on it or don't work on it between semesters, either way, that's up to you. Okay? And the individual members can also work on the plan. Some can choose to work on it and others not work on it. You don't have to do everything as a team working together. You can work together as a team or you can work individually. That is up to you, how you work on your plan. Okay, I hope that's clear. You have some action you need to do during this term. To recap is you need to investigate, learn before you launch your project, and you're going to do that learning by either doing an interview, an observation, or written research. Okay, then you need to gather together. There's 2 meetings this term. You need to gather together as a team to discuss what you learned. And you need to individually write a reflection paper talking about your experience and what you learned. Then you need to meet a second time as a team with your advisor to finalize what your culminating project is. And your team leader is going to write up a description after you've had that team meeting with your advisor and deciding what your project is, what you're going to do. And the team leader turns that in to their advisor for approval by the last class session for this semester. And you're done. I hope you have a lot of fun doing this. I hope you come up with a great project. I will be praying for you and praying for your projects. Okay, God bless. Now the next video, video 4, is specifically for team leaders. Anybody can watch it that wants to, but only team leaders are required to watch video 4. Thank you. Bye-bye.